a lot, John. Good morning, everybody, and thanks a lot for being here. I really wanted to start today by saying again, thank to John and the whole team for thinking about us for this collaboration, for this important topic. We are very happy to be here and to have this collaboration and to try and be as helpful as possible. I am Gabriele, I'm Italian, as you can see from my name, so I was glad to see that there are some connazionali in the chat, so buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Sorry about the Italian digression. Today I'm joined by my colleague Rosina, which you can see somewhere here among the participants, and she will be helping us with the exercise if we make it on time. Today's session is going to be dense. There's going to be a lot of stuff. I tend to speak fast because I'm Italian, but please feel free to interrupt me at any second and to tell me whether I'm going too fast or too slow, whether there is something that you did not understand. And if you have any questions at any moment, just either use the chat if you don't want to speak with the microphone, or just unmute yourself and speak, and I will try to reply you as soon as possible. I want this to be a situation in which you benefit from our experience rather than just having a textbook presentation, which is also important, but the most important thing is to get on your personal context, on your work context, daily life context, and understand how what we will be presenting today can be helpful to you. So keep it interactive because I do want to hear your talks, your experiences, your goals. Perhaps there will be space for some digressions. Listen to your peers and the other participants. So if somebody else is talking, please wait for your turn. Don't directly use the microphone, but just wait for the other person to finish. And again, ask questions for anything. If you think anything is unclear, I will try to use a terminology which is as easy as possible, but if anything at all is unclear at any moment, just feel free to tell me and we'll go over that. In terms of the agenda, we will go over the EU institutions, not all of them, but we will have a quick refresher. We will then go through the EU legislative procedures. Well, not all the procedures, but I have prepared for you today a presentation on the two main procedures, so to make sure to address what's most used and what can be useful in your cases. Then we will explore a little bit together some potential files that might be of interest for you. And of course, also there, feel free to chime in with other legislative files if you think that there's more than what we are presenting. And then if we manage, I wanted to do with you an exercise on stakeholder mapping. No problem if we don't make it today. As I have told John, this exercise is going to be useful for you, not just for today, but every time that you are trying to approach advocacy for your battles, for your issues. So if we don't make it in time for the exercise today, I will still leave the board open because the exercise is going to be on a platform which is called Miro. You don't need to do anything. You just need to click on the link and you will, be brought to the board. And perhaps it asks you just to put an email address, and this board will be open for you for months until the project ends. And when the project ends, I will be talking to John and I will be downloading the board and you can take it as a PDF. Think about the board that I will give you not only as a space where you can exercise stakeholder mapping, but think about a board that you can use for brainstorming in general, to drop their ideas, to drop their a plan, because of course, at any moment, you will be free to write us, to ask for advice, to ask for questions. Perhaps we can get on the board together. I will be sharing my contacts with John after the session so that he can share it with you. And I really hope that we will be helpful in that. Right, let's go. Just a few words on the Good Lobby. I like to say that we are an NGO who helps other NGOs. We do so through different services, which entail consulting on EU affairs or also national affairs, specifically on how to make advocacy strategies, how to adjust advocacy strategies, how to make sure that they are impactful, that they resonate with your stakeholders. We also do policy monitoring, strategic advice, but we also have educational services, such as trainings and workshops like the one we're having today, or longer programs for civil society organizations and citizens. Um, our mission is to equalize access to power, which means that we think that lobbying is not only legit, but it's also an indispensable tool for a better policymaking process. Because we think that when politicians, the policymakers, have heard all the parties, all the different opinions, they are going to produce a better policy that takes into consideration the interests of all. We are called a good lobby exactly because we think that there are ethical and transparent ways in which we can do lobbying in advocacy. And if you think that this is not the case, then perhaps you've never heard of us, but happy that you're hearing about us today. And should you have any more questions about the organizations, I will be happy to have a short call again or to chat via email. Just let me know. I will be sharing my contacts. For now, let's perhaps advance and unpack the European Union institutions together. And I see the chat is very happy. So when we talk about the European Union institutions, we talk about 7 institutions, right? We can see from the top left, we have the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council of the European Union, which are actually going to be the focus of today. But then there's also the European Council, the Court of Auditors, the European Central Bank, and the European Court of Justice. We will also briefly touch on the European Court of Justice, just a couple of slides to understand its functions. But in terms of what we want to do today, so discussing about how we can get involved and step up our advocacy, it will be very important to understand how these 3 institutions work and interact when making EU law. In a nutshell, we can say that the European Commission is made of 27 commissioners, which are 1 per member state, while the European Parliament has currently 720 members of the European Parliament, which are made of political groups that are made of different nationalities. So the political groups in the parliament do not go with national lines. They do meet in national delegations. So perhaps, I don't know, center-left political group will meet with the other parliamentarians of Italy in a national delegation, but they work in a cross-national fashion. And then the last institution we will analyze, after, of course, we will have a short digression on the Court of Justice, will be the Council of the European Union, which exists to represent the perspective of the member states, and we will see that works in a very particular way. So, just a little icebreaker also to encourage you to talk a little bit and perhaps test who in the European Union, which EU institution has the power to propose laws? And don't be scared just to open the mic and to speak or just to write in the chat. You don't want to have a guess. Okay, we are very shy. It's okay. It's only 5 minutes on, so it's pretty normal. So the only institution, yes, Luca.
European Parliament only have rights to do the laws. Others don't.
That's partially correct. Thanks a lot, Luca, for your intervention. It's quite a complicated situation because it may seem that the European Parliament is the only institution that can make the laws. In reality, the only institution who can make laws is the European Commission. Well, we'll talk about the Parliament and the Council afterwards. I do not want to spoiler anything. Let's talk about this institution. So, as I have anticipated, the European Commission is the executive arm of the European Union, which means it's the only institution that can propose law. To make it simpler and to bring in national examples, we can think about the European Commission as the Council of Ministers in a national political system, such as, for instance, Italy or Belgium or the Netherlands or Germany. I won't say France. It can also be similar to France, but France is a semi-presidential system. So there, the parliament and the second chamber, they have less powers, so to speak. But let's think about it as a council of ministers, right? Which is made of, as we said, 27, let's go back, 27 commissioners, one per member state. How does it work? It works that whenever there is a European election, first the European Parliament is elected. After that, the European Parliament will elect the president of the European Commission. How is this done? Well, it's political agreement between the different groups based on the composition, pretty much like an election, a parliamentary election, let's say in a parliamentary republic, right? So the parliament is elected, and then let's say the secretary or the most important person of the political party, which has the highest percentage of votes, will become the prime minister, right? The same happens for the president of the European Commission. Now, what do we need to know about the European Commission? First of all, that it is supposed to be the only neutral institution among the European Union institutions. This means that the Commission is there to do nothing more than the interest of the European Union. No politics is supposed to permeate the rooms of the Commission, but rather only the interest of the European citizens. In this regard, we can identify four main powers. The first one is guardian of the treaties. We will see that the European Union doesn't have a constitution, but has two treaties upon which it functions. And in this regard, the Commission makes sure that the member states are applying EU law and treaties. It is responsible also to punish member states that are not applying the law. As I said, it's the only institution which can propose legislation. There are a few exceptions, but these are not important to mention today. It coordinates and manages policies, networks, agencies of the European Union, and it has the executive powers. So as I said, ministerial powers, right? It oversees the implementation of the European Union legislation, which means it checks at the national level whether member states have brought into their legal systems EU legislation, and it formulates the European Union budget. Although we will see that the European Union budget is then voted by two other European Union institutions, right? Besides that, as I said, Council of Ministers, it means that the Commission also hosts the Foreign Affairs Minister of the European Union, which is called in the EU High Representative of the European Union. It's a vice president, and the Commission has the ability, this is a competence given by the member states, to represent the EU in the international stage, which means also to conclude international agreements with third countries on behalf of the Union, right? This is pretty much the European Commission at the commissioner level. As you can see, we can think about each commissioner as a minister, although in the European Union, these ministries overlaps with each other in a way. There are portfolios which are very horizontal. We can see that if compared to precedent European Commissions, this edition of the Ursula von der Leyen government, let's call it like that, features something unprecedented, which is executive vice presidents, which was usually the case only for the High Representative for Foreign Affairs, which in this mandate is Kaja Kallas. But now it's open to 5 more commissioners, which you can see in this slide in green, right? Teresa Ribeira. The portfolio is, for instance, clean, just, and competitive transition. What does it mean? It means many things. It is an indication of the fact that Teresa Ribeira is, yes, a minister of the European Union, but has different responsibility, is not as vertical and strict as in the national case, right? The same applies, for instance, for Henna Virkunen. On the right, still in green, we see that her portfolio is tech, sovereignty, security, and democracy. Many things. So think about these commissioners, these ministers, as the chiefs of one of or more ministries, because as we just saw, their portfolios are quite horizontal, right? So what is the first thing that we need to do to understand which one is the relevant ministry for us at the European Union level? First of all, we go and check the commissioner, and then you will see that in the page of the commissioner, you will have a list of all the competences as the area of expertise, and it will also tell you which DGs, Directorate Generals, are headed by the commissioner. Directorate General, it's a word for the European Union system to say ministry. Now, for today, I have brought to you an example of one of the Directorate Generals. This is the Directorate General for Employment, DGM. Why did we bring this? This is not the only useful Directorate General that you might need for your work, but it's one of the main ones. For instance, from this DG, we saw that developing the EU disability rights strategy, right? Which means that has a huge portfolio, huge responsibilities on disability and social rights in general. So what's the structure of a Directorate General? As you can see at the top, we have the Commission President and the College of Commissioners. I want to say, and this is something very important that will be helpful, especially for later on when we go and explore the policy-making procedures of the European Union. What I want to say is that the commissioners work with a concept that is called principle of collegiality. It's a college of commissioners, which means that at any moment for any given legislative file, even if it's not competence of that commissioner, the commissioners will tend to agree with each other and vote in block and unanimity. It's very rare to see commissioners disagreeing on each other's proposals. They work together. Everything that comes out of the commission comes as a unified block. This means, and we will see that during the life stage of a certain policy proposal, there will be also a moment in which that given policy proposal will be checked by other directorate generals and other commissioners to make sure that this is approved and shared upon by other commissioners. For now, let's come back to the structure. We see at the top College of Commissioners and Commission President. What do we have at the top of the structure of the Directorate General? We have a commissioner. In this case, we know that for DG EMPL, the relevant commissioner is Roxata Minzatu from Romania. She's an executive vice president. Her portfolio includes people, skills, and preparedness, right? Now, a commissioner is always helped by a cabinet. A cabinet is usually a set of very technical assistants that assist the commissioner in the various issues upon which they are working, which means that if you go and check the cabinet of Roxana Minzatu, you will see that she will have a responsible person for the European Social Fund, perhaps a responsible person for disability matters, another responsible person for education. We can check. All the profiles of the commissioners, their staff, their contacts are all public. We will try to work on this during the exercise. If we don't make it on time, we will be sharing some useful links for you to make it easier to search stakeholders. What's below the commissioner and the cabinet? Usually you have a director general, which oversees the work of the different units, the different directorates, right? Because every directorate general, then it's divided into sub-blocks. Let's think about a ministry for, I don't know, health and education and social issues at the national level. Also, that ministry will have different departments that are specialized to lead on different issues, right? So this is the case also for European Union Directorate General. We have different directorates. We have signed here for you. We have noted in the map Directorate D, which is on social rights and inclusion, and is the directorate from which the EU disability rights strategy went out. Why am I saying all of this? Why is this important? Because we will see, as I said, the European Commission is the only institution that has the right to propose legislation. This means that this will be the first European institutions with whom you need to engage if you want to have an impact, if you want to bring your issues and matters into the policy making table, right? This is the first institution, is the incipit, is where every proposal of the European Union starts, which means you have to know good all the people that are dealing with an issue that might be of interest to you, right? Which will be likely the exercise that I have done here. You will need to identify who the relevant commissioner is. After that, you will have to identify which directorate general is at the head of that process. After that, you will have to go deeper and identify which directorate is holding the pen, and then most likely it will be one of the units. Now, this is very easy to find. For every directorate general, for instance, let's stay with Directorate General of Employment. You just go online and you write Directorate General Employment Organigram. And then you will see that the organigram, this exact thing that I'm displaying here, will pop up, with the difference that that organigram will have names and surnames of head of units and director, which makes it easy for you to understand which unit is dealing with which exact file, which means you already know whom to contact for information. Are you doing something regarding the EU disability strategy? Are you doing something regarding the European Social Fund? Maybe they reply no. Then you can then reply, well, can you point me towards somebody else who can be of help? They will reply to you because you are a citizen. Now, before we move on towards another institution, do you have any questions on the Commission? Is there anything unclear? Does this resonate with you? Is it something you knew already? Is it all new content? And also, am I going too fast? Do I need to slow down? If you don't talk, I will take it as it's all good, Gabriele. Please go on.
Yeah, you're sharing an awful lot, but I think it's being appreciated. So thank you.
Cool, amazing. Then let's go forward to the next slides. Luca, which EU institution is a legislator then? I'm asking you because you were the only one speaking, so I know that you will surely talk.
Okay. Both Parliament and Commission
That's right.
together make legislations.
That's right. The Parliament is one of the legislators. So the EU always to bring a national perspective to make it easier, because these things may all sound new to you because it's European Union. But if you're doing work at the national level, you will see that there is a lot of points in common. That's why I keep bringing the national level as an example. The EU works as a national bicameral system where we have the European Parliament, which let's say might be the Chamber of Deputies, to use the Italian case, and the second co-legislator, which would be the third institution we analyze, the Council of the European Union, which can be considered a Senate, an upper chamber, and we will see why. So, European Parliament, the only democratically elected institution at the European Union level. We elect it every 5 years. Last time it was in 2024, which means that these people are going to stay until 2029, right? 720 members, represents all the people of Europe, and has significant powers if compared to before. Significant powers because the European Parliament legislates together with the Council in over 95% of the European Union legislation through a procedure that is called ordinary legislative procedure. And we will go very granular into the legislative procedure after the deep dive into the institutions. For now, let's explore the three powers of the European Parliament. First of all, as Luca said, it has a legislative power, which means it's one of the two legislative arms of the European Union on an equal footing with the Council of the EU, which means it's much like a perfect bicameralism in a way. They have the same power, although they are composed differently and they represent two different levels, right? As I have anticipated, the European Commission drafts the EU budget, but it then gets approved by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. So together with the Council, the Parliament decides on the budget, on what money of the European Union is going to be spent for a period of 7 years. We will briefly talk about the budget at the end of the presentation because, as it happens, they are negotiating the budget of the Union right now for the period 2028-2034. But then the Parliament also has supervision and control powers, right? As I said, it elects the President of the European Commission. Besides that, it elects all the 27 commissioners as a block, which means that every proposed commissioner by the President of the European Commission, the procedure works like that. The President of the European Commission is elected. Then this President asks the 27 EU member states to propose names for a possible commissioner. Then the President of the European Commission drafts the portfolios and assigns each proposed commissioner to a portfolio. And then this proposed commissioner, they will all need to go to the European Parliament for a hearing, for questioning, which means that the relevant committees of the European Parliament will have to question the candidate commissioner and say, yes, we approve this person, actually convinced us, much like X Factor, right? Or this kind of programs. Yes, it's approved. And then they get elected as a block in the plenary sitting of the European Parliament. Much like for the Commission, I will guide you through the structure, but also the composition, which is very, very important for your work. Because when we talk about the Parliament, we are talking about politics, fundamentally. So, as I said, the groups inside the European Parliament, they are not called political parties, they are called political groups. Why? Because a group is an entity that encloses different political parties that are much alike in thinking. So let's make some examples. This is the actual composition of the European Parliament. One thing that I want to say, starting with, is that since the creation of the European Parliament, we have never had a European Parliament with so much right-wing politicians. This is the most far-right European Parliament in the history of the Union, and we can see that the biggest group is the European People Party, right? It's at the center, 188 members of the European Parliament, which means roughly 26% of the composition of the Parliament. What is EPP? EPP is what in Italy is, for instance, Forza Italia, or what in Spain is PP, or what in Germany is CDU, the Center Democratic, right? So it's much a center-right party. Why is it important to stress so much what the EPP is? Because you have to know, for engaging with the European Parliament, that in this European Parliament, it is not possible to have a majority without that political group. Every file needs to have a majority of the votes at the European Parliament, so roughly 361, 361. If those 188 seats are not there, it is not possible to have a majority. Why I'm saying that? Because, of course, this is one of the groups that you should have in your radar and talk to, especially at the national level, to make sure to bring your issue there at the EU level subsequently. Now, what else do we have there? One of the most representative political groups is the Social and Democrats. You see them in red at the left, 136 seats. This is center-left. It's what in Italy, again, would be the Partito Democratico, is what in France or in Belgium or in Germany would be the Socialists. So pretty much center-left group, which has been forming a giant center with the center-right historically. Now we are seeing some shifts of dynamics because, of course, the European People Party knows about its position of power and knows that any political group needs them if they want to get something passed at the European Parliament level. Other groups, I will go through all of them. We see, let's go leftwards. So we see Renew, which are the liberals, the center. It will be, for instance, at the French level, the party of Emmanuel Macron, right? Quite center, liberals. Then we have the Greens, self-explanatory. We have the left, which will be in Spain, parties like Podemos. In Italy, we have Sinistra Italiana, Alleanza Verdi e Sinistra in general, which are scattered between the Greens and the left. We have components of Bündnis 90 Grünen in Germany. So pretty much moderate left plus green parties. What we then have going rightwards is ECR, which in the Italian case will be Fratelli d'Italia. Sorry about using the Italian case. It's just much more comfortable for me. So right wing, which we saw an increase of this party, right? Same as the Patriots. The Patriots is, for instance, the party of Viktor Orban. And then we have Europe of Sovereign Nations, which is mostly composed by Alternative für Deutschland from Germany. This is the biggest delegation. But you can see that we also have a tag with NI at a certain point. This is non-attached, which means that member of the European Parliament, when they are elected, they don't really need to get attached to one of the political groups. Why do they do so? Because, well, of course, it's much easier to push for your agenda if you have a political group that works with you. While if you are alone in the non-attached, you are usually excluded from the most important files and procedures. You don't have a group. You have less time to talk during committee meetings and plenary, because also this is proportionate to the percentage of members of that group in the committee or in the parliament. So, end of the story, what I want to say is that non-attached, they are also MEPs, they are also having an impact, but they chose not to attach themselves to any of the political groups. Of course, at any given point, they can just decide to get into a political group if they wish so. But for now, the most important thing that you have to consider with the European Parliament, with this European Parliament, is EPP is the kingmaker. EPP is the political group with the most seats. Whichever strategy you want to bring forward to push your issue, you will have to get into discussion with this political group. So be sure to find your ties at the national level and then go up to the European Union level, because it's really important for you to have this kind of interlocutors. Much like I did for the European Commission, this is more or less the structure of the parliament. What do we have? We have the parliamentarians sitting in a plenary, which is 720 members of the European Parliament. The plenary is usually once every month, although there are cases in which there are mini plenaries as well. There is no plenary in August. How is the parliament, how does it work, right? So it works much like national parliaments in small committees, which means for any relevant issue, we'll see here, voila, we have put again the example of the employment committee. Employment will have a parliamentary committee with members of the European Parliament from different groups. The composition of that committee will be more or less equal to the numbers that are in general in the plenary, to make sure that the percentages are the same and the political balance is respected. And much like in the national case, of course, the committee has a chair, a president of the committee. The correct term is chair. And a chair also has different vice chairs. We will not go through today the process to nominate chairs and vice chairs. Should you be curious about that, of course, you can follow up with me. We can talk about that. For now, you have to understand that the chair of a committee is a very important person. You have to remember the chair of every committee and another stakeholder, another figure, which is the committee coordinator. What does it mean? It means that every political group, of course, cannot be chair or vice chair of a given committee. This means that they will assign to that committee one specific member of the European Parliament to be the coordinator of the group in that committee, to facilitate the work, so that whenever there are group meetings, that person is responsible to bring forward the work, for instance, of the employment committee, right? I will not go over also perhaps the conference of presidents or conference of committee chairs. I think it will be too granular, but you will receive the slides at the end. So without overloading right now, after the presentation, perhaps when you will receive the slide, if you want to dig further into conference of presidents and conference of committee chairs, please do so. The only thing that I will say is that the conference of presidents is the organ where most of the work of the parliament is decided and where the lead member of the European Parliament for each legislative proposal is assigned. Now, for you, it's very important to remember that whenever we are engaging with the European Parliament, you have to track the parliamentary committee. The documents in parliamentary committee are online. They are free. You can look at them. You can watch the live streamings of the parliamentary committees. It's always on stream. You just go to the website of the relevant committee and you will be able to watch the stream. And it's very important to track what they are saying, the work that they are doing, because if there is something that you didn't see, perhaps a legislative proposal that might be of interest to you, and you didn't know, perhaps watching the work of the committee, you will see that they are discussing this very file that you're interested on, which means that then you have to start working at the European Parliament level. Another important thing, which I mentioned already, is to make sure to also monitor the political groups. Much like the national cases, political group line is very important at the European level, which means that usually members of the European Parliament will tend to vote according to the political group's line and not according to their national line. So it's very important. All the political groups, they all have websites. These websites will tell you who the coordinator for each of the political committee is. They will tell you if there are any policy advisors directly from the group, which means these are people that help the work of members of the European Parliament and parliamentary assistants on a day-to-day basis, very technical expertise. They most usually do negotiations together with the member of the European Parliament and the APA. So be sure here, if I can summarize this slide, to look the plenaries of the European Parliament every month. There are documents, agenda. It is also web streamed. Look parliamentary committees of the committees that are most relevant to you. Again, we will go through this during the exercise, or otherwise we will share useful links for you. And do not forget to monitor political groups. One important thing that I want to say, if you think that there might be a language barrier there, remember that all the documents of every European Parliament committee or plenary, they are available in all the European Union language. So if you don't speak good English, perhaps you speak Italian only or Bulgarian, whatever, you can just access those documents in your language. So make sure to do so. It's a very nice opportunity to stay on top of the issues and to understand what's going on. Do we have any questions on the European Parliament? Good. All clear then. Now, let's go over the last, well, we will just explore a little bit the Court of Justice. But for now, you will have to know that the last institution that we will treat today is the Council of the European Union. Be careful. There's a substantial difference between the Council of the European Union, the European Council, and the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is a human rights institution that is sitting in Strasbourg, has no relation whatsoever with the European Union. The European Council is actually part of the Council of the EU, but it's the head of state or governments of every member state of the European Union, which means whenever you hear on TV, there's a European Council summit, you will see the various prime ministers or presidents flying to Brussels for the European Council. What you have to know about this institution is that, of course, this is well among the highest ranking institutions because it's the member states head of states or government, and the role of this institution is to give political impetus and direction to the European Union, which can be before a European Union election, actually after the European Union election, when the parliament is elected, there is a summit, and the leader of all the European Union member states will produce a document which will say, for these 5 years, we would really like to see the EU focusing on this issue, this issue, this issue. So it's a set of very broad issues which should then inform the more granular program of the EU institutions in the next 5 years. But this is just out of curiosity. What do you need to know on the Council of the EU? Council of the EU can be actually called the Council of Ministers. Why? Because this institution encloses the perspective of the different member states of the European Union. It is a co-legislator together with the European Parliament. We will see better what this means, how this works when we go over the ordinary legislative procedure. For now, what you have to know is that the composition is as following. There is one minister for each of the countries. It has a president that is it's a member state. This presidency rotates every 6 months, which means that every 6 months we have a different country taking on the presidency. And to date, the Council of Ministers meets into 10 different configurations. Based on the issue, they call different kind of ministers. One that you surely hear often is ECOFIN Council, right? So usually it's the ministers for economy or finance of every member state, or Foreign Affairs Council is the foreign affairs ministers of every European Union country, and so on and so on. Based on the issue, we will have a different composition, a different meeting of the council. Now, in terms of the powers, as I said, this brings together the perspective of the member states to make sure that the legislation done at the European Union doesn't exaggerate or overextend and has been checked by the national level and ensures that the national level is okay with this kind of legislation. It is the co-legislator together with the European Parliament, right? They approve legislation on over 95% of possible policy areas through the ordinary legislative procedures, but it also is entitled to legislate via the consent procedure, which we will see later. As with the European Parliament, it is the budgetary authority of the Union. Actually, the multi-annual financial framework per se, the actual report is a consent procedure report. We will see what it is. And it shares power of implementation, executive power with the European Commission, right? So it checks that legislation is implemented at the member state level, but also assists the Commission in setting the most technical aspects of the policy proposals. So it's actually one of the most powerful institutions. It is surely the most informed institutions among all the ones that I have mentioned. They are informed at both the European Union level, but also at the national level via their own services, but also via relations with other member states. I call it mythological beast because you never know who's inside the Council of the EU, very difficult to access. I will be also sharing some tips and tricks, perhaps, to try and understand how to identify the right people inside. For now, what you have to know is this. This is the structure of the Council of the European Union, right? At the top, you have the Council of the EU, which is the maximum authority. It's the ministers, which vote and approve things. But below these ministers, you have two organs, which are called COREPER, which stands for Committee of Permanent Representatives. Why? Because the EU doesn't have embassies per se. It has permanent representations, right? Every member state has a permanent representation in Brussels. And these permanent representations, which are ambassadors, so the permanent representative is an ambassador level negotiator from the member state sent by the government. These people, they are entrusted with bringing forward the work of the Council at the EU level by receiving a precise mandate and instruction at the national level. How do they do that? Well, through these two COREPERs, which are two preparatory bodies where all the permanent representatives or deputy permanent representatives meet together. So ambassadors, junior ambassadors, and negotiate over legislation and try to get an approval, right? Now, in terms of one question might be, how do we know whether my file is one given legislative proposal is either in COREPER 1 or COREPER 2? Well, simply based on the nature of the issue. Some issues are explored, worked upon by deputy permanent representatives. Some other issues are explored by permanent representatives, which are more senior. All of these things, again, can be found online. So online, you can actually find whether one COREPER or another is responsible for a given file. What you need to know here is that, of course, these two groups, they have two preparatory bodies, which I have put in the slide here. In the case of COREPER 1, we have the Mertens group. In the case of COREPER 2, we have the Antici group. But the basic level is the working parties. We just discussed about European Parliament committees, right? We saw that the committees, they drive the work of the European Parliament. They discuss the proposal, they try to reach agreement, they put amendments. This is the same that happens at the working party level. You will have a figure called attaché, which are national experts sent by the member state with very technical expertise on given area, which are entrusted to start brokering an agreement between the different member states. So I have presented you the council from the top, which is the ministers, to the bottom, which is the working parties. Actually, the chain of commands works the other way around. So usually when a file is received, it will be starting at the working party level, and then it will start going up until basically what the ministers have to do is just agree, just say yes. But all the work, all the negotiation, all the technical details, these have all been discussed by the groups that you have below. One important thing that I want you to know from today is the importance of the presidency, right? We can see here we are in the second half of 2026. First half of 2026. We said that the presidency lasts for 6 months, which means that every 6 months there will be another presidency. This is very important for you to identify. Why? Because you can engage with them early. Perhaps there is something that you want to be in the political agenda and it's not in the political agenda. How do you bring it forward? Just talk to the presidency before it even gets into office and say, this is my issue, we've been working, this is my coalition, this is what we would like to have. Of course, these are more detailed discussions that I'm sure you will have with Alejandro in the session after my session. And by engaging the presidency early, you can make sure perhaps that one of your issues will land into the agenda. Why is also the presidency important? Because the presidency represents the Council of the EU at large, which means that whenever there will be negotiations, the team of the presidency will be the one driving the process. Whenever the European Commission will make a proposal, the presidency of the Council will be the first one knowing that and will be given the proposal, right? So be sure to analyze the programs of the presidency. They have programs for their 6 months, accessible online. Also, be sure to try and understand as much as possible how to reach out to people working in the council, such as attachés. Now, in some cases, there are websites. In some cases, there are transparency registers, which means that your member state will be publishing with who, when, and on what task with a potential stakeholder. And perhaps you can find the contacts there. Suffice to say that these people, they are employee of the member state, which means that they will have a ministerial email address, not a European Union email address. So if you go to your own Ministry for Foreign Affairs, perhaps you will be able to, if you know name and surname of the person, to formulate the email address of the person, or you can simply send an email to the relevant ministry and ask, saying, I am interested to this issue. I need to talk to somebody at the permanent representation of Italy in Brussels. Do you have any contacts you can share? You are a citizen, you are entitled to do so. If this fails, there are other tactics, but this is perhaps for another discussion. Last important thing that I want you to know from the Council is that while the European Parliament votes like a normal parliament, so majority of their members, 50% plus one, the Council of the EU has a double voting system. A proposal to pass in the Council needs to have the votes of at least 55% of the member states, which represent at least 65% of the European Union population. I know this sounds crazy and difficult to calculate. There's a calculator online, which tells you for every member state what's the percentage of share of vote that they have. But please, please, please keep this into mind. It's a double vote in the Council of the EU, and it's very important because every member state makes a difference. You see already in this slide, there are the voting weights, right? It tells you. Voting weights are based on population, of course. And yeah, this is going to be the next trio, the next presidency. We will have Ireland, which will start in July. Yeah, I've kind of said that already. These are the main players that you will see. COREPER, working groups and commission, the rotating presidency. We are not going through all of that. I don't want to bombard you with stuff, but you will be receiving the slides so you can make sure to have a read at that. Also because it's going to be helpful for the stakeholder mapping exercise. Now, just a couple words on the European Court of Justice, and then perhaps, John, if you want, we can have a quick 5 minutes break to refresh our minds a little bit and to go to the toilet or drink some water. Think about that as the Supreme Court in every member state, but for the European Union, which means that, first of all, it can only have a say in matters that relate to EU legislation. No EU legislation, no European Court of Justice. Otherwise, you have to go to the national level. And of course, it rules to check whether legislation is approvable at the European Union level or not. Citizens, people, institutions, member states can challenge the validity of a legal act to the European Court of Justice. I think that the best thing to say here is to share an example. Let's talk about an instrument which is called European Citizen Initiative. So the European Citizens Initiative allows citizens to ask the Commission to put forward a legislative file if 1 million of signatures are collected in at least 7 member states of the European Union. As it happens, there are 15 European citizens' initiatives that have overcame the threshold of 1 million signatures. One of those is an initiative which is called End the Cage Age, which basically wants to ban cage farming for animals in the EU. The initiative reached 1.4 million signatures, overcome the threshold many years ago. The Commission has so far failed to act. What did the committee of the initiative do? Together with the Good Lobby, and notably our founder Alberto Alemanno, they have first of all presented a complaint to the Ombudsman. We can go over the Ombudsman if you think it's useful, or I can share something via email with John, to check for potential maladministration, but also brought the case in front of the European Court of Justice. Now, what will the European Court of Justice do? First of all, based on the case, it will check whether the European Commission is obliged to act upon that specific European Citizens Initiative proposal. So it will decide whether they are obliged, whether they are not, whether they are obliged to put forward a timeline to further develop the process. So in principle, it will decide on a dispute over European law, right? Which is what you need to know on the European Court of Justice. The composition is made by different judges from each European member state. It works in different kind of compositions and chambers. These things can all be shared in the follow-up. For now, I just don't want you to confuse a lot. What I think is useful for you to say is that whenever you have a doubt about perhaps your member state implementing a European Union directive, so you think that a directive of the European Union has not been implemented at the member state level enough, then as a citizen, you have the right to go to the European Court of Justice and say, hey, I want to, go against that member state because I think that they are not really using European Union law as it should be used, right? So it's a court to challenge instances of European law. You can do that as a normal citizen. It has happened. You can do that as an entity, as a company. Perhaps companies, they want to sue the European Commission because of the way the European Commission has been doing legislation. They don't like it. They sue the European Commission. It has happened. Usually digital organizations, digital businesses sue the Commission. I think it has happened with Meta, perhaps Amazon as well. Again, all the proceedings, the pending cases of the European Court of Justice are also easily findable online. You just write European Court of Justice and you have access to the database. Now, conscious of the fact that I've been speaking for 55 minutes and I've been giving you a lot of information, I wanted to ask, first of all, whether everything is clear and if you have any questions. Also, if you feel that don't feel at ease in sharing any questions right now, please remember your question, share it with John, and perhaps John can come back to me after the webinar with a list of questions, and I will go through all of them, and I will take the time to reply to all of you. To me, the most important thing is that everything is clear, the pace is not too fast. John, perhaps a 5-minute break just to refresh our minds? Yeah?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Gabriele. This is really very exhaustive and detailed, and that's really giving everybody all of the tools they need to understand how this process works. Yeah, I suggest that we take a short break and come back at 25 past the hour. Okay?
Cool. Thanks a lot. See you in a bit, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.